Welcome in. If you're joining us today, you're probably the kind of person who loves a good aha moment.
Oh, absolutely.
You're looking to gain thorough, deep knowledge without feeling, completely bogged down by information overload. You want the actual insights.
Right. You want multiple perspectives.
Yes. And most importantly, you want to know how all of this actually applies to your everyday life.
Yeah.
So you are in the exact right place.
It's really fantastic to be here with you. We've got a deeply layered topic today that actually manages to bridge thousands of years of human experience in a surprisingly practical way.
We really do. Today, our mission in this deep dive is to explore an ancient text, specifically Proverbs 12, which is traditionally attributed to Solomon.
Right.
And we're looking at that alongside a modern companion guide that details how these ancient sayings actually map onto our lives right now. We're going to extract the wisdom from these texts and translate it for the modern world.
Because as we're about to see, human nature really hasn't changed all that much.
Not at all. I mean, the technology and the clothing are different, but the internal wiring is identical.
Yeah, that's the real hook of this material. The circumstances around us evolve at this blistering pace, but the core of who we are, our blind spots, our egos, our desires, those remain remarkably consistent.
Okay, let's unpack this because Proverbs 12 is packed with these rapid-fire contrasting statements. But before we get into the granular details of specific verses, could you just give us a high-level view of what this chapter is fundamentally trying to communicate?
Sure. So at its core, Proverbs 12 is a collection of highly practical axioms. It constantly contrasts wisdom with foolishness, but it's not doing this in abstract philosophical terms.
Right, it's very grounded.
Exactly. The overarching argument is that our character directly and inescapably shapes our outcomes. It reveals that our everyday, seemingly mundane habits.
Like how we handle correction or how we speak to our colleagues.
Yes, or how we approach our daily grind. How we treat those with less power than us. These aren't just random, isolated actions. They gradually but definitively build the architecture of our lives.
The building blocks.
Precisely. The text argues that wise habits produce deep stability, while careless behavior inevitably engineers unnecessary hardship.
I'm really struck by that phrase, unnecessary hardship.
Yeah.
It implies we're often the architects of our own misery.
We really are.
And that brings us right to the very first verse, which tackles the posture of learning. The language here, it really doesn't pull any punches.
No, it doesn't.
Verse 1 says, "Whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish." I mean, brutish is a heavy word to drop right out of the gate.
It's an incredibly deliberate word choice. Brutish evokes this vivid image of a creature acting entirely on base animal instinct.
Just totally lacking higher reasoning.
Exactly, or lacking the capacity for self-reflection. When an animal is corrected or redirected, it often snaps or bites back out of a perceived threat.
That makes sense.
So the text is pointing out that when we react to constructive feedback with defensiveness or anger, we're essentially bypassing our higher cognitive functions. We're operating from a pure reptilian survival instinct.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Feedback often does feel like a personal attack, especially in a high-stakes environment like a modern workplace or, say, a competitive academic program. Why does this ancient text frame the ideal response as actually loving instruction rather than just, tolerating it?
That is the core psychological shift the text is pushing for. Tolerating feedback means you're just enduring it to survive the performance review.
Right, just gritting your teeth through it.
Exactly. Loving instruction implies a fundamental mindset shift. You recognize that the gap between where you currently are and where you want to be is bridged by the very feedback you're tempted to reject.
Wow, bridged by the feedback.
Yeah. In ancient Israel, learning happened through intense mentorship and communal correction. A person willing to be taught was considered deeply wise because they valued the end goal of growth over the temporary comfort of their ego.
So taking that to the listener today, whether you're navigating career development or personal growth, treating criticism as a diagnostic tool rather than a personal indictment is, well, it's the ultimate life hack.
It really is. It accelerates growth exponentially.
That reframing just changes everything. It takes the sting out of the reproof. And it ties heavily into another major theme we found in the sources, which is the absolute necessity of seeking out good counsel.
Oh, absolutely.
If we look at verse 15, it says, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise." It is so incredibly easy to fall into the trap of assuming our perspective is the objective reality.
Proverbs basically identified the Dunning-Kruger effect thousands of years before modern psychology even gave it a name.
That is so true.
We all suffer from a massive lack of objectivity about our own lives. We have incredibly complex internal rationalizations for our poor choices. The fool is right in his own eyes because he's living in a self-constructed echo chamber.
And in the ancient world, leaning on community wisdom was a literal survival mechanism.
Right, to prevent a bad harvest from starving the village.
So how do we break out of that echo chamber today? Because we're making massive life, financial, and business decisions, and it's very easy to just surround ourselves with people who nod and agree with us.
You have to actively build systems of counsel. That means running major decisions by mentors, advisors, or friends who have explicit permission to tell you when you're wrong.
People who won't just flatter you.
Exactly. You need people who aren't blinded by your emotional attachments to a project or a relationship. Seeking guidance acts as a circuit breaker for our own biases.
A circuit breaker. I like that.
If you're convinced you're always right, you're effectively cutting yourself off from a massive wealth of protective wisdom. Wisdom that could save you from that unnecessary hardship we talked about earlier.
That idea of humility doesn't just apply to taking advice, though. It heavily dictates how we dish it out. Which brings us to how this text treats our words. I've been calling this section the digital sword.
Oh, that's a great title for it.
Right, because verse 18 has this visceral imagery. It reads, "There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health." And it follows up in verse 25 by saying, "Heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad."
What's fascinating here is how the text recognizes the tangible, almost physical impact of invisible words.
Because a sword causes literal tissue-level damage.
Exactly. The writer is arguing that careless, reckless words do the exact same level of trauma to a person's psyche or their reputation. In ancient communities, speech was the primary currency. A rumor or harsh slander could financially and socially ruin a family.
But wait, isn't there a time when harsh truth is entirely necessary?
Yes.
How does the text balance a good word that makes a heart glad with the need to give that reproof we just talked about in verse 1? If we're always just trying to make people glad, aren't we risking toxic positivity?
That is a crucial distinction to make. The difference lies in the metaphor itself. Think of a sword versus a scalpel.
Okay, both cut.
Both cut, but the intention and the outcome are entirely different. The piercings of a sword implies reckless, destructive slashing. It's gossip, insults, tearing someone down for the sake of ego.
Right.
Reproof, on the other hand, when delivered by the tongue of the wise, acts like a scalpel. It might hurt momentarily, but the explicit goal is health and healing. The wise person doesn't avoid hard truths, but they deliver them thoughtfully, aiming to restore rather than destroy.
That makes total sense. And the medium we use to deliver those words has changed the stakes entirely today. A sword wound heals eventually, but a digital footprint is basically immortal.
It really is.
A hasty email, a careless social media post, that reckless slashing is broadcast instantly and archived forever.
The velocity of modern communication is terrifying when paired with a lack of wisdom. That is why thoughtful communication is more desperately needed now than perhaps ever before. A good word can act as an immediate antidote to the heavy, stooping heart so many people are carrying around in our highly anxious, hyper-connected world.
And intimately connected to the power of our speech is the absolute necessity of truth. Verse 19 lays this out without any ambiguity at all. It says, "The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment."
If we connect this to the bigger picture of what we see in society today, this verse is an incredibly sharp diagnostic tool for our culture.
Yeah, how so?
Well, dishonesty, deceptive marketing, or spreading manufactured outrage online absolutely gives us short-term advantage. You might win the news cycle, you might artificially inflate your stock price, or win an argument by twisting the facts.
That's the lying tongue being but for a moment. Here's where it gets really interesting. The text isn't denying that lying works. It's actually acknowledging that deception is effective, but only with a strict expiration date.
Exactly right. It acknowledges the temporary utility of a lie, but warns of its inevitable collapse. Think about the modern battle against misinformation or corporate fraud. The lie spreads like wildfire, but it possesses no structural integrity.
No bedrock.
Right. When the truth inevitably surfaces, the credibility of the liar is decimated, often beyond repair. The practical, modern application is about the compounding interest of a good reputation. Truth builds lasting trust.
A reputation built on transparency and honesty creates a foundation that is established forever. You don't have to constantly look over your shoulder to remember which lie you told to which person.
It's the difference between building a house on bedrock versus...
Versus building a house of cards.
Precisely.
And that transitions us perfectly from how we speak to how we execute.
Let's dig into the daily grind. The text gets surprisingly granular about work ethic and the psychology of execution.
It really does. Listen to verse 11. He that tilleth his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he that followeth vain persons is void of understanding. Before we go further, we need to clarify vain persons, because in modern English, that sounds like someone who just spends too much time staring in the mirror.
Right, it's not talking about vanity in the sense of physical appearance. In this context, following vain persons or vain pursuits refers to chasing illusions.
So get-rich-quick schemes.
Exactly. It's the ancient equivalent of falling for those schemes, blindly following grifters or obsessing over empty productivity hacks that promise massive results without requiring any actual sustained effort. It's the pursuit of the shortcut.
The ultimate modern hustle culture trap. The text is contrasting the boring, repetitive, but guaranteed yield of tilling your land with the flashy, empty promises of the shortcut.
Yes.
And the text gets even more pointed about our failure to follow through in verse 27. It says, "The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious." I find this image incredibly relatable.
It's a brilliant psychological observation. It's describing someone who expends all the initial energy required to go out and hunt the animal. They do the exciting part.
The adrenaline rush part.
Right. But then they completely lack the discipline to actually process and cook the food once they have it. They abandon the project at the 1-yard line.
We see this constantly today. It's the entrepreneur who buys the domain name, designs the logo, but never actually builds the product.
Yes.
Or the team that brainstorms an amazing initiative, but fails entirely on the execution and maintenance.
It perfectly captures the exhaustion of follow-through. In an ancient agrarian society, failing to execute didn't just mean a failed startup, it meant starvation.
Stakes were ultimate.
The application for us is about the unglamorous nature of true diligence. Real security in your career or your personal goals isn't just about having great ideas or initial bursts of motivation. It's about the discipline to roast what you hunt, to be the boring, tedious final 10% of the work required to see a project through to its actual completion.
And that sustained discipline is what makes someone's work precious or highly valued in any economy.
Exactly.
It's a call to be a faithful steward of your own potential. Which brings us to another profoundly revealing aspect of stewardship in the text, and that is compassion. This is where the ancient wisdom really tests our internal character.
This is a big one.
Verse 10 states, "A righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel."
This is a staggering verse when you unpack the power dynamics at play. In the ancient world, livestock were vital property, but this proverb pushes far beyond basic asset management. It introduces a principle of radical empathy.
How?
Think about it. How you treat a creature that is entirely dependent on you, a creature that has no voice, no rights, and cannot offer you any strategic advantage or networking opportunity, that is the truest, most unfiltered reflection of your internal character.
Wow. So if we take that principle out of the ancient pasture and into the modern world, the implications are huge.
Yeah.
Because we are constantly surrounded by vast power asymmetries.
We are. This wisdom applies directly to how executives treat the janitorial staff. It applies to how we act as stewards of the environment, extracting resources without a thought for the long-term devastation.
Right.
It applies to how we advocate for vulnerable or marginalized populations who just don't have the leverage to demand a seat at the table.
Yeah.
If someone is charming and deferential to their CEO, but dismissive and cruel to a barista or subordinate, this ancient wisdom diagnoses them instantly.
Because kindness toward those under our care who can do nothing for us in return is the ultimate litmus test of human integrity.
Exactly.
It's sobering to think that how we treat the lowest person on the corporate ladder is the ultimate proof of our character. So what does this all mean? We've explored the necessity of loving feedback, the surgical power of our words, the permanence of truth, the discipline of the daily grind, and the empathy required in leadership. How does this all tie together?
It all converges on the concept of deep, unshakable stability. Look at verse 3. "A man shall not be established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous shall not be moved." Integrity, diligence, and compassion aren't just polite suggestions for being a nice person. They are the structural foundation that allows a human life to endure catastrophic stress.
The root of the righteous shall not be moved. It's about what happens when the storm inevitably hits.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about organizations or individuals that cut ethical corners to get ahead. They might experience explosive short-term growth, but they are incredibly fragile.
House of cards again.
Right. When a market downturn hits or a crisis emerges, those houses of cards collapse. But the individuals who have spent years building deep roots by consistently speaking truth, accepting hard feedback, and treating people well, they possess a resilience that allows them to weather the storm.
And this brings us to what might be the most profound payoff of this entire deep dive. Throughout this chapter, woven into all these practical tips about farming and speaking and working, are these direct call-outs to the divine.
Yes, the spiritual element.
Verse 2 says, "A good man obtaineth favor of the Lord." And verse 22 is blunt. It says, "Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight." It shifts the focus from just living a good life to actively strengthening our trust and relationship with God.
This raises an important question. How do we actually bridge the gap between our chaotic modern routines and the divine? What this text masterfully suggests is that our relationship with God isn't built exclusively in moments of grand, dramatic spiritual retreat or isolated meditation.
Okay.
The profound argument here is that the spiritual life and the practical life are the exact same thing.
So the mundane tasks are the spiritual building blocks.
Well-
It's the Tuesday morning staff meeting. It's the email you draft when you're deeply frustrated.
Precisely. When you choose to deal truly in a complex business negotiation where you could easily slip in a lie to maximize profit, you aren't just following an ethical code, you are actively delighting the creator.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
When you utilize your words as a scalpel to heal a relationship rather than a sword to win an argument, you are aligning yourself with the nature of God. Your spiritual life is tested and forged in how you respond to an unfair critique, or whether you have the discipline to finish the unglamorous project you started.
It's all connected.
By integrating these daily practices, we naturally deepen our trust in God because we are living in rhythm with the design He laid out for human flourishing.
This has been incredibly insightful. Let's distill all of this down for you, the listener. The ultimate takeaway from these ancient texts and modern applications is this. Proverbs 12 proves that the small, microscopic choices you make every single day are far more than just practical life advice.
They are the foundation.
Exactly. How you digest a piece of critical feedback, whether you fire off that harsh text message or choose a healing word, whether you push through the final 10% of a grueling project, and how you leverage your power over the vulnerable. These are not isolated throwaway moments. They are the very bricks and mortar of a stable, secure life. And even more importantly, they are the daily stepping stones that build a deeper, more profound relationship with God.
It's truly remarkable how a text so ancient can read like a blueprint for modern survival. We might be managing social media algorithms instead of village gossip and navigating corporate ladders instead of agricultural harvests, but the human heart requires the exact same diet of truth, discipline, and compassion to truly thrive today.
It's a perfect mirror for our modern struggles. So as you step back into your day, as you open your inbox, return to your projects, and interact with the people in your care, we want to leave you with this one vital question to mull over. How will you apply this information in your life?